The Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Peter Schiff on this Friday, April's first day, April Fool's Day. Welcome aboard. Now, there certainly are a lot of people making fools of themselves today over the jobs numbers that came out, slightly better than had been anticipated. We'll be talking about that and other economic data that came out today. Also, if you want to call up, it's 855-4SCHIFF. Joining me at 11:05, the top of the next hour, should be an interesting conversation with Bernard von Nothaus, who I guess is going to be the first terrorist who has appeared on this show. What did Mr. Nothaus do to terrorize the United States? Well, apparently he minted some gold and silver coins, and he now faces jail time for that. You know, my father actually is considered a terrorist by the Department of Prisons. When he's coded, his coding, I forget what it was, but he has extra supervision or surveillance of his mail and things of that nature because he is categorized as a terrorist. And what was his crime? Not paying income taxes. So there's a very broad definition here of what it means to be a terrorist. I mean, maybe it's anybody who threatens the U.S. government, even if they're threatening it in a positive way, right? Even if they're threatening something that the government is doing that's wrong, and they're trying to expose that criminal conduct by the government. So I think these types of terrorists don't represent threats to American citizens like the terrorists who blew up the World Trade Centers. They simply represent threats to the American government, but in many cases, those are positive things because we're threatening a government that is doing harm, that is doing wrong, and they're trying to right those wrongs. So they're really more of freedom fighters or patriots. But from the government's perspective, since they threaten government power, government monopoly, government control, then they like to label them as terrorists. So anyway, that conversation is coming up at the top of the next hour. First of all, let's talk about the big number out this morning, the non-farm payroll number for March. And basically, the U.S. economy added 216,000 jobs in March, which was better than the 190,000 that had been anticipated. The unemployment rate, the official unemployment rate, dropped 0.1% from 8.9 to 8.8, although the actual unemployment rate, which they call U6, which includes the discouraged workers, that also dropped, but it dropped from 15.9 to 15.7. So still, a very substantial percentage of Americans are, in fact, unemployed. The labor force participation rate stayed extremely low, the lowest it's been since 1980 or so. It ticked up 1/10 from last month, but still very low, meaning that many, many Americans have simply dropped out of the labor force, most likely because they are discouraged at the job prospects that exist. The number of long-term unemployed, however, that also ticked up. It's, I think, 45.5% of the people who are unemployed today have been unemployed for 27 weeks or longer. I'm not sure if that's a record or not, but it's higher than it was last month. Manufacturing managed to add some jobs. It added 17,000 jobs, but the expectation was 30,000. We need a lot more manufacturing jobs. We're not getting them, and we're not going to get them, unfortunately. The big jump was in the service sector, 185,000 jobs added. That is the problem because the people in the service sector, by and large, aren't producing goods, but they're collecting paychecks, and when they go to spend those paychecks, well, it runs up the trade deficit. And so we need to see a bigger transformation in the nature of our labor, the way our labor is distributed. We need more goods-producing jobs and fewer goods-consuming jobs. Unfortunately, we're not going to get that. But, of course, the reaction on Wall Street, the Dow is up 70 points. The S&P is up about 10 points. It's a pretty decent move. The dollar is up, although it's starting to lose some of the rally that it had. The big move is against the Japanese yen, which continues to fall as a result of that intervention last week. I think we're now down. The dollar buys about 85 yen now, 84.5 yen, whereas only was buying 77 or so the evening of the intervention. although it's not all up for the dollar. The dollar is at a new 52-week low against the Canadian dollar. You now need $1.03 plus to buy one Canadian dollar, so that currency is bucking the trend. But we'll see. I mean, the dollar might end up closing lower against more currencies by the end of the day. Precious metals initially sold off. Gold's off about $14. Silver's off about 40 cents as a result of this. Oil is higher, though. Although oil made a new high for the move, above 107 a barrel before moving back around unchanged. Right now it's up about 30 cents, just around 107 even. The oil chart, I think it looks amazing. If you want to look at a very, very bullish chart that is going to go higher, it's oil. I mean, I think the chart really looks bullish, and I think that it's clear sailing for a move up in the price of oil from here. You know, we also got economic data, ISM manufacturing number, came out weaker than anticipated, but the prices paid component, which measures what manufacturers are paying for their inputs, that jumped by more than anticipated. Again, more evidence that inflation is working its way through the price structure, as if we needed more evidence. Of course, no matter how much evidence there is, Ben Bernanke is going to refuse to acknowledge it. And the reason is, you know, the jobs that we gained in this report, we only gain those jobs because the Fed has got the pedal to the metal, because interest rates are practically zero. Because what that is doing is that is allowing Americans, both in the private sector and in the government, to spend money that they otherwise would not be able to spend if interest rates were higher. And so all of these jobs are a function of money being spent that we don't have. It's the result of borrowed money, which either needs to be repaid or repudiated through inflation. But either way, the jobs are temporary. They're only here so long as the artificial support that is sustaining them is here, which is why I'm so adamant in my view that the Fed does not want to raise rates, because it understands that this phony economy is on life support, and if it pulls the plug by raising rates, then the whole thing implodes. And, you know, I spoke about this again on that Fast Money last night on CNBC. And, of course, one of the guys, I forget which one, you know, and of course, right after I'm off, they always like to argue with me when I'm off the air, so I can't come back. But he said, oh, Peter Schiff, all he wants to do is raise rates and make people unemployed, and like I'm a heartless guy, and I just want to inflict pain unnecessarily on people. You know, I'm not happy about the fact that when interest rates go up, it's going to be painful for some people, but that's the reality. It's not my fault that the government created all these problems that need to be solved. I didn't create the problems. In fact, I warned about them. If the government had listened to me years ago, the pain would not even be necessary. But the fact is, it is necessary. We have to go through this. We have to restructure the economy. The sooner the better. It's not that by avoiding rate increases, we avoid the pain. We don't. We postpone it, but we make it worse. And so more people are going to suffer from runaway inflation than would suffer from a necessary correction that would result from a sound monetary policy that included higher interest rates. Anyway, don't go away. We've got more to go on the Peter Schiff Show on SchiffRadio.com, the gold standard in talk radio. Welcome back, everybody. This is Peter Schiff on SchiffRadio.com, and during the break, I was reading through what looks to be a pretty good op-ed by Florida Senator Marco Rubio on why he won't be voting to raise the debt limit. It seems like it's pretty good, and it's nice to have some senators that have some integrity, it looks like, in the United States Senate. We're going to try to get Marco Rubio on the show. I know it might be a difficult thing, but probably nice to have him on as a guest. Also, I was looking at an article that my brother Andrew had emailed me on Fannie and Freddie pay, which is kind of unbelievable. It says that the U.S. government, because basically Fannie and Freddie are now government entities, and so the chief executive officers, the top guys at Fannie and Freddie for 2009 and 2010 were paid $17 million to run the company. $17 million. The top 6 executives were paid $35 million to run what amounts to 2 government agencies. Well, how can they do that? I mean, how can anybody earn more than the president. I mean, this is part of the government now. These are not private sector companies. How can we be paying what amounts to bureaucrats these salaries? Now, in a private sector, you might say, well, these salaries are justified because, after all, they're making all this money for their shareholders, and we need to pay them this high amount of money because, if we didn't have these guys that we were paying these multi-million-dollar salaries, the shareholders would suffer because these guys are uniquely talented to be able to run these companies. Well, how did these gentlemen who are running Fannie and Freddie do during the 2 years where they were paid $35 million by U.S. taxpayers? How much money did they make us running Fannie and Freddie? Oh, wait a minute. They didn't make us any money at all. They lost us $153 billion. They lost us $153 billion, and we paid them $35 million to do it? Like if we would have had some less expensive executives, are they saying we would have lost a lot more than $153 billion? In fact, the total losses that were projected through the end of 2013, and I'm sure the losses are going to be a lot more than this, are $363 billion. How much do you have to pay people to lose you $363 billion? I mean, where is the outrage here? Where is the outrage even among the liberals in Congress who always like to jump on the high-paid executives in the private sector? At least they're earning their money. At least shareholders are paying their salaries out of profits. These huge salaries being earned by the Fannie and Freddie executives are on top of the massive losses that their companies are generating, and it's being paid for not by shareholders who willingly own the stock, but by American taxpayers, by me, who I don't want the shares. I didn't want any of my tax dollars going to bail out Fannie and Freddie, but they did anyway, and now more of my tax dollars are going to pay these executives. I don't know if they're all the same incompetent executives that ran the company into bankruptcy in the first place. I mean, sure, several of them are probably the same guys. But how can you even justify? In fact, I know there's a rule that if you work for the government, I don't think anybody who works for the government is allowed to make more than the president. Well, that should be applied to entities that the government takes over. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that are unemployed. I'm sure we can find some people to run Fannie and Freddie who can also lose hundreds of billions of dollars, just like the current managers. And it wouldn't cost us nearly as much money. Also, I got an email. I didn't see it, but somebody just emailed me that they saw the chief economist. Let me find that email from Bloomberg. And I didn't have Bloomberg on, but he was talking about inflation, right? And this guy's David Kelly, right? And he is the senior economist at J.P. Morgan, a big bank, right? So this guy apparently knows something about economics to be the senior economist of one of America's largest banking institutions. Well, what did this economic genius have to say about inflation? He said that he's not worried about rising prices being inflationary. He's only worried about oil, he said, because when the price of oil goes up, that it's the OPEC makes more money. But he said if the price of milk goes up, that's okay because the farmer makes more money. And so it doesn't hurt the economy because whatever Americans are spending extra on milk, well, that's fine because the farmer now has extra money for selling milk, and so he'll end up spending that money, and so it's not a problem. I mean, what an asinine statement. I mean, first of all, it's a huge transfer of income from certain people to other people, so isn't that problematic for the people who are seeing their income transferred? But more important than that, what about the cost to the dairy farmer? What about how much more it costs him to feed his cattle? The dairy corn prices are going up. So what about the fertilizer that's going up? What about the energy that he needs to run? Maybe the farmer really isn't making more money because the price of milk is higher. Maybe he's just passing on all of his extra costs. If you're going to make an asinine statement that it doesn't matter if if prices go up because somebody is earning more, well, then inflation is never a problem. I mean, you can always say that. Oh, the price of cars went up. Well, that's okay because the person selling cars made money. Oh, the price of clothes is going up. Well, that's okay because the person selling clothes made more money. If you believe this guy, then inflation is never a problem. It's so ridiculous to me that somebody can rise to such a level of prominence in a profession and know absolutely nothing about that profession. I mean, it is amazing the complete and total level of ignorance about basic economics among people who are professional economists. And I know sometimes people want to, I refer to myself sometimes as an economist, and some people who like to criticize me say, well, I'm not really an economist because I don't have a degree. I don't have a degree in economics. If I had a degree in economics, I would know nothing about economics. Now, I studied economics in college. I took econ classes. I was a finance major, so there were a number of econ classes, but I didn't get my degree in economics. But most of what I learned while I was in college about economics was wrong. And the thing is, I had the good sense to know it was wrong. The problem is most people don't. And by the time they graduate, they're totally brainwashed. And then they say these crazy things like this economist from J.P. Morgan. Anyway, let me take a break and see if I can grab a couple of phone calls. If you want to call in, the number is 855-4-SCHIFF, 855-472-4433. First caller is Roy from Canada. Roy, congratulations on getting richer today as your currency rises to a new 52-week high against the dollar.
Actually, Roy dropped off.
Oh, I just was informed that Roy dropped off. All right. Scott from Wisconsin. You're on with Peter Schiff.
Hey, Peter. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad. I got a question with you. I'm sorry. First of all, I'm a spiritual man, but I wanted to ask you a couple questions, and then I got a site for you to check out. The unemployment.
Hey, you know what, Roy? Can I ask you? Scott, do me a favor. I got close to time. We're coming to a break. Hold on, and I'll take your calls after this commercial break. Welcome back, everybody, and this is Peter Schiff, and on the line with me is Scott from Wisconsin, who was about to ask a question or two. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, Peter, first of all, I want to say I have a lot of respect for you.
Thank you.
To go on the TV and tell about the truth. And when they complain about you, you're just ruffling their feathers. But my question about unemployment is, I was affected in Wisconsin when General Motors closed its plant about a couple years ago. And my first question is, that unemployment numbers, are they concerning the people that are working part-time across this country, number one? And it's kind of interesting when you said that the long-term unemployment is on a rise. It's like a puppet. You know what I'm saying? It's like they're playing a game. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, the way the numbers work as far as the part-timers, the official unemployment rate, which they're going to report in the news today at 8.8%, and Obama will say, yes, my policies are working. That number doesn't – if you have a part-time job and you're still looking, like you get a job, let's say you're working 20 hours a week at McDonald's, you're an unemployed engineer, and you're looking for an engineering job, but in order to make ends meet, you took a part-time job, you're considered to be employed. But in that U6 number, which is about, 15.8%, in that case, the person who's working part-time at McDonald's but looking for something better, he's considered unemployed. And so that's part of the big difference between those two numbers. And in my opinion, if you got a part-time job while you're looking for something better, looking for a full-time job, I consider that person to be unemployed. And I'm sure he considers he's unemployed because he's looking for work. And the fact that he's, doing something part-time to make ends meet while he's looking for a job, I don't think that should disqualify him as being unemployed. But the government likes to do that because it makes the number look smaller.
Right, Peter. And I just wanted to say this. What's going on with our economy, and I know that you say Peter planted a nice orange tree out in his backyard, and what's happening is, like, these guys, when you go speak on TV, is they just see the top of the tree deteriorating, but they don't see that the roots are being severed underneath it, see? And you were talking about that if they raised interest rates or whatever, they're down
Well,
my knowledge
they take a very superficial view of what's happening. They don't dig down beneath the surface to see what's really going on. And yes, I mean the roots are rotten in this economic tree, and they don't understand that. I mean when you have people like this chief economist from J.P. Morgan could say something as stupid as inflation doesn't matter because it doesn't hurt the economy. Because when food prices go up, the farmers make more money. I mean, that's not. And first, some of those farmers might not be making more money. Maybe their costs are rising even faster than what they're able to increase. But the whole, I mean, if that was the case, I don't know why anybody was worried about inflation in the 1970s either. Why would anybody ever worry about inflation? So when people are that ignorant and they're way up there in the stratosphere of a hierarchy of employment, we're in serious trouble.
Right, exactly, Peter, and that's exactly right, because this guy, it hasn't affected him yet, and he's obviously a fool. I call people fools that have understanding of false knowledge and wisdom, and that's, like you said, that is something, man. I mean, to hear that, but it ain't no surprise because this guy has a high position, and he doesn't have it affect him yet, like a lot of these people and me that have been unemployed for over 2 years now.
Yeah,
so thanks for taking my call.
Thanks for calling. It'd be funny, too, to see if there was, some people were complaining to their congressman that, food prices are skyrocketing, I can barely afford to eat. And then you say, well, don't worry, because the farmer's making more money. I mean, I wonder how that would go over in politics. Anyway, I'll take the next call. Is Frank calling from Garden City, New York?
Hey, Peter, thanks for taking my call.
Thanks for calling.
Peter, my question for you is, if you're right, and when this QE2 ends in June, if interest rates do spike up the way some people expect, do you think that would end up in a sharp rise in the dollar and a sell-off in precious metals, kind of like what happened in the early 80s, or you think it will be a different situation this time around?
Well, I don't think it's going to be a big rise like we had back then. I think there certainly could be a knee-jerk reaction if the Fed doesn't immediately announce, QE3 is here, that you might see a rise in the dollar. Now, who knows where the dollar will be when that happens? It could be quite a bit lower than it is today, and then it does get some kind of bounce when you don't get the official announcement. But I believe that there will be QE3, whether or not we go immediately from 2 to 3, or there are weeks or months where there is a gap in the official policy. But I think behind the scenes, the Fed might not be announcing that there is an official policy to monetize the debt by a specific dollar amount, but that doesn't mean it can't do it anyway. And I think that will happen. So, I think the Fed is going to be increasing, expanding its balance sheet, buying U.S. Treasuries, regardless of whether or not it officially calls it QE3, but it will be accomplishing the same thing.
So these Fed officials, every time I look online, you see a different official saying how they're going to be raising rates sooner than later. You think that's just jawboning?
Yes, I think that they're trying to get the benefit of a rate hike on restraining inflation and propping up the dollar without actually having to suffer the pain of actually raising rates. So that's why I say it's all bark and it's no bite. It's cheap. Talk is cheap when it comes to central bankers. Central bankers can talk tough all they want because there's no cost to talking tough because they don't actually have to raise rates. And they hope that by talking tough that they'll somehow rein in the inflation expectations and and buy themselves some extra time. But at some point, the market has to challenge the central bank and force them to put some teeth into that bite. And that's where I think they're going to be reluctant. And I think, yes, eventually they will raise rates, but it will be too little to make a difference. They'll do those quarter-point rates, and does it really matter if rates are 0 or 25 basis points or 50 basis points if by then inflation is 10 or 15%? I mean, the interest rates will be so far below the inflation rate that even though they're raising them, they might actually be falling in real terms.
Got it. And last question for you. Do you think that the market going up 100 points a day lately is because in some way it's pricing in a QE3? And do you think it'll make it that much more worse for the market if they don't come out right away and do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the market is rising for the same reason that oil prices are rising and commodity prices are rising and gold prices are rising. It's that money is losing value. And when money loses value, prices have to rise. That's just a fact. And, that's what's going on. It's liquidity. It's inflation that is driving the story in all asset classes. And people look at the U.S. market going up and they think, well, it must be the economy is getting better. Well, no, it doesn't mean that at all. And if you look at the actual economy, things are not getting better. We have massive unemployment, even though it's officially 8.8%. As I said, unofficially, it's 16%. And even that number doesn't tell the whole story because of this huge contraction in the labor force. The cost of living is rising. Home prices are falling. So people's biggest asset is losing value, yet the cost of everything they have to buy to survive is getting more and more expensive. And that's about to kick into higher gear. I mentioned the quotes yesterday from the CEO of Walmart who says, brace yourself, we're going to get massive price hikes starting in the summer across the board. This is just, this is stagflation, worse than the 1970s. But anyway, don't go away. We got another segment coming up before my 11 o'clock interview. You're listening to The Peter Schiff Show on SchiffRadio.com. Welcome back, everybody. This is Peter Schiff on SchiffRadio.com. I'm taking calls at 855-4SCHIFF, 855-4-SCHIFF. My brother just sent me an email that he knows David Kelly. He actually used to, I guess, be a client of the firm. He says he's actually a pretty bright guy. So I don't know. Maybe I was a little harsh on him. Maybe I didn't actually see the clip. So maybe I was just responding to the email that I got from another individual. So if I was a little rough on the guy, I guess I'll have to apologize. But anyway, I've got to see the clip for myself because I still think that particular statement, maybe he's smart in other areas, but that particular statement, I think he needs to rethink. Anyway, I've got some sound that I want to play. This is from MSNBC. This is a Democratic Representative, Elijah Cummings, and this is very typical rhetoric that you have coming out of the Democrats in Congress. And I'm going to play quite a few clips from this guy. It's cut number 2.
Not only are the cuts devastating in that they cut to the bone, many of them cut almost through the bone. And we see communities being harmed. And the interesting thing, Andrea, is at the end of last year when the compromise was done, we had Republicans saying that in a time of a fragile economy, we just simply could not afford to raise taxes on people when they wanted to they wanted to keep taxes low for the upper 2% of our society. Well, wait a minute. You can't have it both ways. You're going to now cut spending that would go to students for Pell Grants in a fragile economy, cut spending for making sure that children can go and be a part of Head Start, 200,000 of them. I mean, come on.
Okay, two big important things here. One, you notice how he's able to accuse the Republicans of wanting to make devastating cuts, cut to the bone, cut through the bone. They're cutting nothing. They're talking about $60 billion in cuts from a $3.7 trillion budget. We're talking about cuts that would still leave the budget deficit at about $1.6 trillion in the year that they're trying to cut $60 billion. So my point was, if you're going to be accused of making devastating cuts, then why not at least propose some devastating cuts? Why not, if you're going to fight over a principle, then fight over a real principle? Because what the Republicans are fighting over is nothing. Absolutely nothing. Even if they get everything they want, it's nothing. And of course, they're going to compromise and they're going to claim victory. Oh, we got the Democrats to agree to cut $30 billion. I mean, come on. The whole thing is ridiculous. And then number 2, the congressman says that Republicans can't have it both ways. When they say we can't afford to raise taxes in a weak economy, he says, but we can't afford to cut spending. Well, but where does the government get the money it is spending? It is taking it from the private sector. So when he talks about we can't cut spending because the people who are getting the money need it, well, where is it coming from? It is being taken from the economy. It's either being taken because we're borrowing money that otherwise would have been invested, or we're printing money and we're creating inflation and we're destroying people's savings and people's purchasing power. You can't have it both ways because it's not the same thing. Anyway, let's continue a little bit more with this discussion on cut number 3.
Republicans misunderstood what happened in November. What the American people want is for us to work together. Yes, we all agree that there should be cuts, but those cuts should be done with the surgical skill of a heart surgeon, and not coming in with a hatchet just chopping up everything. And again, there are two sides to this issue. There's the income side, and there is the spending side. All you hear from the Republicans is let's not spend on that, let's not spend on that. But the fact is that they're now cutting. Today they're going to vote to cut 70,000 jobs from the FAA. Our airports are going to be a lot less safer because we're not going to have the money to take care of them and have the personnel available to keep us safe.
A hatchet? Taking a hatchet? You're talking about 1% of the budget? That's a hatchet, a cleaver? I mean, it's not even a pocket knife. I mean, it's like a pair of tweezers that they're taking to the budget. And, of course, he's upset that some federal employees are going to lose their jobs. Well, that's part of cutting. Part of the reason that the federal government is spending too much money is because it's employing too many people that should be in the private sector producing wealth, not in the public sector feeding off that wealth. So you have to have cuts to employment. That's the only way to cut. Let's play this final small clip, cut number 4.
And at some point, reason has to prevail here. And we cannot allow the Tea Party to rule. We just can't afford that because all we're doing is cutting off our future.
First of all, there is a big attempt out there to vilify the Tea Party. The Tea Party isn't ruling. The Tea Party wanted a lot more cuts than what is even being proposed. I was at a lot of Tea Party rallies here in Connecticut, and, I don't think they're happy at all with what's going on. I think a lot of the people in the Tea Party are probably feeling betrayed about now for the people that they voted for based on what they are doing. And I had another cut here. Let me find it that I wanted to play along those lines of vilifying the Tea Party. Where is it? I don't know. Let me take a call while I'm looking for it. Let me take Jeff from New Fairfield, Connecticut. Jeff, you're on with Peter Schiff.
Hey, Peter, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I just want to comment about the mortgage, the housing market.
Uh-huh.
A good friend of mine's got a house he owes $700,000 on. It's been appraised at $300,000. He hasn't made a payment on it in 3 years. Last fall, he decided that he was going to just abandon the house. He called the bank and says, "Look, I'm out of here." So he left.
I'm wondering why did he leave though? I mean, he was living for free for 3 years. What was?
I tell you why. He couldn't afford to heat it. It's like a 4,000 square foot house. He couldn't afford to heat it. He's a mortgage broker.
So even though he had no rent, I'm assuming he wasn't paying his property taxes. So he wasn't paying rent. He wasn't paying property taxes. He had no mortgage. He couldn't even afford to live in the house for the cost of the heat.
Exactly. So he left. Well, he realized that he made a mistake, and yesterday he decided he was moving back in. I mean, meanwhile, the bank went in, winterized the home for him. They cleaned up the house for him. And yesterday he opened the door, and he's moving back into the house, and he called the bank, and the bank says, "Oh, okay, we'll send you a modification package." I mean, this is insanity. How long does this go on for?
You know what I think the guy should have done? He should have rented it out. And then he could have pocketed rent while he wasn't paying his mortgage or his property taxes.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe he could have rented the place out for a few $1,000s a month. Oh, yeah, you're talking about moral hazard. And I believe that one of the reasons that you still have consumer spending going on is because consumers are spending the money that they're not making in mortgage payments. And what's happening is the losses are just flowing on the books of the banks, but the banks are not accurately reporting about it because they're not really marking these loans to market. They're showing up at the Fed. I mean, this whole economy is a complete facade.
Exactly. Yeah, and that actually last fall, before he left, when he called the bank to tell him he was leaving, they begged him to stay there. They asked him, "Please give us 9 months to try to sell your house." Yeah. It's insane.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for the call. Hey, here's the cut I actually wanted to play. There's two of them, actually. The first one is from the floor of the House yesterday. This is McDermott speaking. Listen to what he had to say. Cut number 7.
Is the right kind of measured first step we can take now. I hope the Republicans will join us in helping this economy. I'm tired of reading the Constitution and all the silly things we've done for the last 13 weeks. When are we going to see anything having to do with job creation? I yield back the balance of my time.
So he's tired of reading the Constitution. I don't think he's ever read the Constitution, because what he stood, his bill is a bill to ensure families have access to a doctor. Well, where in the Constitution is the right to a doctor? I mean, we need people reading the Constitution. He thinks it's a silly waste of time to read the Constitution. Anyway, the other quote is from MSNBC, Representative Chris Van Hollen, who is speaking about a government shutdown. Again, listen to what he has to say about the Tea Party. It's cut number 9.
Democratic Congressman Chris Van Hollen of Maryland. He's the ranking member on the House Budget Committee. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me.
Good to be with you, Tara.
Are you rooting for a government shutdown?
That's absolute nonsense. What's happening today is you have the Tea Party driving the train for the House leadership. And the Tea Party's position is, if we don't get things 100% our way, we want you to shut down the government. And that's what you've got going on right now in the House Republican caucus. Essentially, the Tea Party has taken over the steering wheel, and the leadership is sort of in the back seat. And so we'll have to see how this turns out.
Yeah, well, the Tea Party, again, being vilified, they're not getting 100% their way. They're barely getting anything. The Republicans are demanding peanuts. They're demanding a small fraction of what the Tea Party voted for. Anyway, don't go away. Coming up is my interview with Bernard Van Hollen. So don't go away. It'll be very interesting. This is Peter Schiff on SchiffRadio.com. Welcome back, everybody. This is Peter Schiff on the Peter Schiff Show at SchiffRadio.com. And joining me now is Bernard von Nothaus, who recently lost a legal battle over minting Liberty dollars, I guess gold and silver coins, and he has been classified as a terrorist, I guess because he was perceived as a threat to the counterfeiting operation going on at the U.S. government. You see, the U.S. government hates competition, and I think the funny thing, though, is that Bernard is accused of, I guess, of counterfeiting, but he's making money of a higher quality than what he's accused of counterfeiting, because his money is gold and silver, and what the government is making is just a piece of paper. So I don't understand how you can counterfeit something if you're improving on it, but I don't even think it was counterfeit. But anyway, joining me, Bernard, are you there?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning to you. First of all, fill me in and my listeners on exactly what happened here. What were these coins like that you were making? I mean, was there any way to confuse them with legitimate U.S. coins? And then what happened? How were you charged criminally? And give me the whole situation in a nutshell.
Okay, Peter. A whole situation in a nutshell, we'll have to start with the use of that four-letter word that you just mentioned a couple times, and that'd be the word coin. So I want to be really clear that I never issued any coins, we never marketed any coins, and we never let anybody use that four-letter word without objecting to its use, because a coin, as defined in the jury instructions that were supplied by the judge, he acknowledged that a coin was a metal object that was stamped and issued by the government as money. Mm-hmm. So trust me, Peter, I am not the government.
Okay, so what did you call them? Medallions?
Well, interestingly enough, when the U.S. Mint issued their warning in 2006, they never used that four-letter word because they knew that we couldn't make coins, and so they referred to them as medallions. So a lot of times people refer to them as medallions, but the word I like is their proper name, silver liberties or gold liberties. Just like the government has silver eagles and gold eagles, well, we have gold and silver liberties.
All right, but was anybody confusing them with legal tender issued by the United States?
Never. I mean, look at it. You've seen the pieces. They're 39 millimeter. They're big, round, shiny silver objects, right, Peter?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, how much silver was in a silver liberty?
1 ounce, 1 troy ounce of 3/9 fine silver.
All right, so you got a full ounce. And
yes, sir.
Was there a dollar? Was there a denomination stamped on it anywhere?
There was a Liberty dollar denomination.
So it said $1 Liberty dollar.
Yes, sir. Well, we didn't do ones, but we did 10s, 20s, and 50s.
But a 10 Liberty dollar had 10 was that? But how many ounces was in that?
Well, 1 ounce.
So it was one ounce, but it had 10 Liberty dollars written on it.
Yes, sir.
And then you had a larger denomination.
Yes, because as the price of silver moved up, then we moved up the denomination. Doesn't it just make sense if the underlying commodity that backs up the currency increases in value? Shouldn't the purchasing power increase in value?
Oh, so as silver prices went up, so
yes, I mean.
But so what you were doing is if the silver price went up, you would issue the same coin with 1 ounce in it, but you would put 20 Liberty dollars on it?
Well, we didn't issue a coin again, Peter, but yes,
medallion.
We issued.
Well,
that's okay. I won't correct you every time because it's easy to fall into that trap.
Was that part of the problem? Let's assume that you had issued a Liberty dollar where it was 1 ounce of silver and it said 1 Liberty dollar, and you didn't.
No. We couldn't do that because you couldn't issue an ounce of silver with $1 on it. I mean, the U.S. government does that, but that's lunacy. I mean, you're going to pay $40 for a 1 ounce silver from the U.S. Mint and use it for $1 because that's
I know.
what
Right, but I mean, it's not
right,
but it's not a real dollar. So what you're doing then, you were just putting that denomination. You were putting the denomination. So basically, if silver was $20 an ounce, you would just write 20 on there, and because you would sell them for 20. Is that how it worked?
Well, no, it's a little more complicated than that, Peter. You can't buy an ounce of silver and issue a currency with a face value of $20. Just imagine you can't buy a car for the weight of steel that's in the car.
Right, but okay. So, and how were you selling them? Were you selling them just retailing them, and people would call up and you would sell them based on the actual melt value, or if silver was $20 an ounce and I bought one of these from you, how much would the coin have cost me?
Well, it depends on if you were a regional currency officer or if you were an associate or if you were the public. It's a regular national distribution model, Peter. Like when you go to buy a car, you don't go to Detroit to buy the car from Ford Motor Company, for example. You go to the dealer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and if you're buying a used car, well, then you're going to pay a different price than on a new car.
But the coins did the coins say United States on it anywhere? Did it have any legal tender language on it?
Some of them said that there was a notice on some that said not intended to be used as coin, legal tender, or current money. I mean, they were very clearly, obviously, not intended to be counterfeit U.S. coins.
Okay, now we're people. So how did the government? They charged you basically. What was the crime that you were charged with committing? What were you convicted of?
Okay, I was charged with 3 different offenses. One is counterfeiting.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2 was uttering counterfeit, and number 3 was a conspiracy to defraud the government.
Okay, first of all, on the counterfeiting, what exactly did they say you were counterfeiting?
They said I was counterfeiting U.S. coins.
But did they look like U.S. coins?
Not even close. Not the same size. Not in the same color. Nothing. Plus the fact that there's no U.S. coin.
Yeah. Did they have any witnesses that testified that they took these things thinking they were U.S. coins and they felt that they were gypped off?
No.
Because to counterfeit something, it has to look like the thing. So I can understand how you counterfeit a $100 bill. You make something that looks like a $100 bill, and you pass it off as if it was a $100 bill, and you're getting $100 worth of value from something that you just printed for a few cents. Now that's what the government does, but they don't want anybody else doing that. But obviously, it cost you a lot of money to make those coins. And then you sold them for So I don't understand what witnesses or evidence of counterfeiting were they able to put up there to show that you counterfeited?
I can answer the word none, but it doesn't really go to the lunacy of the whole situation, because the government called in a quote-unquote coin expert. He had some slides, and on one particular slide, Peter, it had two images. It had a picture of the Washington quarter on one side, and it had a picture of the Liberty dollar with the
all right, hold on. We're going to have
image.
to hold. We're about to run out of time, so let's pick this up where we left off after the break. You're listening to the Peter Schiff Show on SchiffRadio.com.
The Peter Schiff Show. To President Obama, Secretary Geithner, Madam Pelosi, and all of the socialist econ professors across America, we're sorry. We're sorry. Peter Schiff is back on the air.
Welcome back. This is Peter Schiff talking with economic terrorist Bernard von Nothaus. Bernard, also, so counterfeiting was one charge, but the other one was defrauding the government. What did you defraud the government out of?
Well, if there aren't any victims, Peter, then the government steps in and says that they are the victim.
But the victim of what? How was the government injured in any way based on what you were doing? What did the government lose?
Well, precisely, Peter. You were talking about counterfeiting and using something of no value to get something for value. In our situation, we gave something of more value than what we were supposedly counterfeiting. How can you counterfeit something when you're giving more value than what the original item is for?
Yeah, the whole idea behind initial counterfeiting was that you would, and the fear behind counterfeiting is somebody, let's say you have a silver dollar, and somebody makes something that looks like a silver dollar, but there's no silver inside it. Maybe it's copper coated with nickel, kind of like the coins that the government counterfeits today. And the idea was that, well, if it was counterfeit, you wouldn't be getting all the silver that the face said. But if you made a silver dollar with using as much silver as the government, then there would be no damage to introducing it into circulation, because whoever accepted it would get as much silver as if he got one directly from the government. I mean, so the whole thing is, obviously you're not counterfeiting and there's not fraud, but obviously they were able to convince 12 morons that you were guilty.
I wish that you were on the jury, Peter, because indeed 12 morons, as you said, came to that conclusion, even though we made a very strong case that this did not look like when we had the break. You were talking about comparing what we were doing to the U.S. coins, and as I said, there was a slide by this coin expert that had the George Washington picture on one side and had the allegorical Liberty dollar head on the other side. I mean, clearly different. He testified that they were the same. And you look at it on the screen, and the jury look at it on the screen, and you go, how is a bald guy, George Washington over here, looking like a woman with a tiara that says Liberty? I mean, where do they look alike? I mean, the whole thing was ludicrous. I mean, I
don't understand. Was the jury, I mean, were they hung at all for a while? Did they deliberate, or was it kind of like quickly unanimous?
Would you believe that they delivered in less than an hour? In less than an hour, they brought back 3 guilty verdicts on all 3 points. Less than an hour. Did
they have one single witness that testified that that they were given one of these coins in a transaction, and they thought it was real money?
They had one witness who was an elderly, beat-up lady that looked like she was in poor health. I'm being kind. And she said that she received one of these from somebody 7 years ago, and it was really nice, so she put it away. And then 7 years later, when she saw my fellow male co-defendant on TV, that out of the blue, she remembered this guy as being the guy that brought it into her pizza parlor, and that she saved it all the time because, well, it was big and beautiful, shiny and silver. And then she realized spontaneously, Peter, that she'd been defrauded. And she was the only witness the government was able to bring about.
But
even though
defrauded in what way?
That's what we wonder about. She couldn't deposit in the bank, and so she felt like it must have been. She kept it all this time. She kept it for 7 years.
But somebody used it to pay for some pizza.
That's right, and it was a $10 piece, and at the time she turned it in, it was a $50 piece. So the value of the Liberty dollar that she had gone up 500%.
Right, but meanwhile, you didn't spend that money; somebody else did.
I did not do that.
So you were. If anyone was the counterfeiter, it wasn't you. It would. I mean, you might. Let's assume somebody took some monopoly money, which clearly doesn't look like real money. And went into a store and bought something, and somebody was dumb enough to take it. Does that mean that they can charge Parker Brothers with counterfeiting because somebody took some of their monopoly money and spent it, and somebody was dumb enough to take it? I mean, when you're marketing these things, you're not saying this is U.S. legal tender.
Definitely not. Matter of fact, our whole marketing point, Peter, was the fact that it was not legal tender, that it was private, voluntary barter currency. It was something to be used between consenting adults.
Yeah, and there's nothing illegal about barter, right? Barter's not against the law.
Definitely not.
Yeah,
we were just talking about bartering.
I mean, but if somebody wants to trade, a chair for a refrigerator, they can do it. There's nothing illegal about that. You can trade all you want. I mean, kids trade baseball cards. I'll give you, this guy for that. I mean, that's not illegal. So if you want to say, hey, will you give me your radio? I'll give you this Liberty dollar in exchange for it. And they say, okay. I mean, that's not illegal.
But illegal. The bells are going off, Peter. You can't do that. You can trade fluids, but you can't trade silver between consenting adults.
Well, why not? What's the difference?
Because the government's afraid of it. Don't you know where the government's coming from regarding gold and silver?
The real threat here is to the government's monopoly on the creation of money. What they don't want is an escape valve. They know that they're creating all this inflation. They're wiping out the value of people's savings. You can prove that lady that took that Liberty dollar, she is better off because she took that Liberty dollar because it's appreciated fivefold.
Yeah.
But clear.
Absolutely, Peter.
But clear, you're not the one that passed it. So you're not the counterfeiter. The counterfeiter is the guy that gave it to her. If anybody is a counterfeiter, it's certainly not you. But the government doesn't want this happening. The government wants everybody using the money it prints because what they're afraid of is that more people like you will start creating alternatives to the U.S. currency, not as counterfeit, not trying to pretend it's the U.S. dollar, but specifically saying it's not the U.S. dollar because it's better. It will retain its value. You can take this Liberty dollar and you can put it in the ground and you can bury it up and it still has value. You can't do that with the crap the government's printing.
Peter, I love you. You're talking. That's the gospel, But the government doesn't want to hear.
Meanwhile, what was the? You got a fine? You got jail time? What's the situation?
Oh yeah, I've been found guilty on 3 different counts.
Right, but what's the fine?
15 years.
15 years in jail.
15 years.
Yeah. Well, look, they railroaded my father, and they're doing the same thing for you. I feel for you, but you're a patriot. And it's really a shame that, under the name of justice, we get this kind of political phony trial. And you'd be a political prisoner if you do any jail time, in my opinion. Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. We've got more of the Peter Schiff Show coming up after the break on SchiffRadio.com.
The Peter Schiff Show. We now return to the Peter Schiff Show.
Call in now, 855-4-SCHIFF.
That's 855-472-4433.
Rebel Radio. The Peter Schiff Show.
Well, Welcome back, everybody. This is Peter Schiff. And, I've got Bernard sticking around. I've got a few callers that might be interested in asking some questions. So I'm keeping them on for a little while longer. And before I go to the phones, just make a comment on the commodity markets. As I said earlier in the program, I did not think that sell-off we had in commodities earlier in the day on the stronger-than-expected job numbers would last. And as it turns out, I was right. Oil, which had been negative, is now making new highs. It's up better than $1 a barrel. We're now above 107.50. Silver, which was down 50 cents when the program began, is back to unchanged. That's a 50-cent rally in an hour and a half. The CRB index has now moved into the black from the red. Gold is still negative, but it's cut its losses in half. And the dollar is now falling back. It's gone negative against the euro. It's still up against the yen, but it's not up as much as it was. The Australian dollar is now very close to a new record high. It's not quite a record, and the Canadian dollar is making new highs, adding to its record. We'll see what the rest of the day has in store, but it looks like it could be a pretty big reversal on this Friday. But anyway, okay, we got the guests back. Anyway, let me go to the phones now and pick up the callers. First up is Bob calling from Ann Arbor, Michigan. You're on with Peter Schiff and Bernard von Nothaus.
Hello, Bernard?
Yes, sir, Bob.
Hello? Yeah, Bernard, it's a little hard to hear you. This is Bob Van Bemmelen from Ann Arbor, Michigan. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. What's happening, Bob?
Good. Well, I want to make 2 points, then I got a question. The first point is I noticed on the Kitco site that one of the banners there is they're selling the new Canadian 1-ounce silver grizzly bear coin at a premium of $43.61. They're calling it a coin. You went to great lengths for us not to call these coins or current money, and I think people need to be aware of that there are other people using that term. You specifically did not want us to use that term, to your credit. Unfortunately, the jury was not convinced of that. Secondly, this Saturday is the 40th anniversary celebration of the Hash Bash in Ann Arbor. And I don't want to talk about marijuana here, but John Lennon came to Ann Arbor at the Chrysler Arena in 1971 to put on a concert, a Free John Now concert.
To Peter's show.
John Sinclair was convicted of possession of 2 marijuana joints and sentenced to 10 years in prison. After serving 2.5 years, and after this concert, 3 days later, he was freed on a Michigan Supreme Court ruling that marijuana statutes were unconstitutional. The point I'm making with that is that, and that goes to the question, and probably maybe for Peter here, how can we make this whole thing go viral on the Internet? The press is obviously not going to cover it because they're all controlled. And the thing that disappoints me significantly is the fact that hard money people out there are not getting behind you, Bernard, and supporting you, against this travesty and injustice.
I don't know. I mean, obviously, look, Bernard is not a criminal. He's not a terrorist. He's not a counterfeiter.
Right.
He doesn't belong in jail, yet that's where he's going, because the government just doesn't like what he's doing. And, you can't be put in jail because the government doesn't like what you're doing. It isn't a crime. What he did is not a crime. It does not fit the definition of counterfeiting. It does not fit the definition of fraud, yet he's convicted anyway because you have these crazy judges that lie to the jury, and they know they can lie on the bench because nothing ever happens to them. And the juries are stacked with morons. I mean, anybody with an ounce of intelligence, they can't get on a jury. They don't. The government.
I agree. So how can we take this viral over the Internet so people are aware of the travesty and justice here?
I've often said you never get a fair trial when if you murder somebody, you'll get a fair trial because you're only a threat to other American citizens. But if you do something against the government, whether it's tax evasion or this, you never get a fair trial because when the government is on one side of it, it's never fair. It's always skewed in favor of the government because the government controls the courts, the government controls the process.
That is true, Peter. And you don't really realize how controlled it is until you're into the process. But I'd like to say a good word about the judge. I believe Judge Voorhees had a fair trial, was a fair judge at the trial. I think that somehow the jury was co-opted. For this,
well, I don't know, Bernard. I think if the judge was fair, he would have thrown out the government's case for lack of evidence. And the fact that it was he should have known as a matter of law that you did not counterfeit. That as a matter of law, what you did was not counterfeiting. They charged you with something that you couldn't have committed. They should have thrown it out for lack of evidence. They had no witnesses. You yourself, they didn't have a single witness that showed you trying to pass off any money as being legitimate U.S. currency. You know, they didn't have any. There's nothing. They had no. So they had no case. The judge should have thrown it out. It never should have gone to the jury. Anyway, Bob, thanks for calling. Next up is Eric calling from Vancouver. You're on with Peter and Bernard.
Hey, Bernard. Now,
Eric?
The coins that you were issuing, were they base metal and plated coins?
No, sir. And we didn't issue any coins. We issued a private voluntary barter currency that was pure gold and pure silver. And actually, we did some pure platinums for Ron Paul.
Okay, so you were issuing paper bills? Is that?
No, this wasn't paper.
The bills of debt instrument. We issued warehouse receipts backed up by gold and silver.
Oh, you were issuing paper or coin?
We issued paper, we issued specie, and we also issued digital. You were available in 3 different forms, Peter.
All right, so I didn't know about the paper. So but the paper was what? It was a receipt for gold that you stored.
There was actual gold and silver stored in the warehouse that was independently audited every single month, and you could turn in the certificates, and because the certificates were genuine warehouse receipts in denominations of 1, 5, 10s, and 20s that you could turn in and recover the gold and silver. Also, we had
were the certificates
$1,000
negotiable? I mean, could they
Absolutely.
go from person to person, or so it was a bearer whoever had the certificate could redeem the gold?
Absolutely, they were bearer warehouse receipts, and they were acknowledged to be legal by Edmund C. Moy, who was the director of the United States Mint and the person who put out the warning against the Liberty Dollar. Mm-hmm. How about that?
I guess in a way they're like the Perth Mint certificates that we sell at Euro Pacific Capital, except they're being stored in Perth in Australia, and you're giving us a certificate, but it is not. You know, there is a name. There is a name associated with the certificate. So yours were in bearer form. I wonder if that's where they had a problem. Did they have a problem with the paper, or did they just differentiate between the paper and the coins?
Can I jump in?
As I said, Peter, the director of the United States Mint acknowledged that the paper was legal. The paper was never in question. The fear
and did the paper look anything like a Federal Reserve note?
No, not even close.
All right,
not even close. It has Statue of Liberty on it. It's really a beautiful piece. Different colors, different sizes. Really great work.
Okay, so nobody would it probably looked less like real money than Monopoly money.
Well, it's a hell of a lot better than Monopoly.
I know,
money,
but I'm saying that
way.
it probably Monopoly money probably bears a closer resemblance to U.S. currency than what you were printing.
That analogy has been made, and I would agree with it, Peter.
Yeah, so from that thing, so Parker Brothers, they should be locked up for counterfeiting, as well as any games where they make play money. You know, my kid has a bunch of play money upstairs. He has play 5s, 10s, 20s, and they look pretty good. I mean, they're very close to U.S. currency. I mean, in the dark, you might confuse it. Anyway. Stick around. We got one more segment. We'll keep Bernard on the line, and I'll continue to taking calls on SchiffRadio.com, the gold standard in talk radio.
Your bakers sleep outside your doorway. Your prophets sleep to wander road.
The Peter Schiff Show. Since the Peter Schiff Show was last on the air, the national debt added another $7.89 million. Luckily, Peter's intelligence is growing twice as fast.
That's incredible.
Welcome back to your source of sanity in an insane world. It's the Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome back. This is Peter Schiff with Bernard von Nothaus, and we got a lot of calls. I'm not sure I'm going to get to them all, but I will give it a try. First of all, the commodity rally continues. Live cattle prices hitting a new contract high. But don't worry, when you pay more money for a steak, you can rest assured that it's okay because the beef farmer is making more money. Oh, wait a minute. Corn prices up 42 cents a bushel, almost a new record high. Well, maybe not. Maybe he's not. Maybe it's a corn farmer. Well, wait, oil prices up over $1. You get the point. Oh, I realized I made another mistake with David Kelly. He wasn't a client of Europe Pacific Capital. He was a client of my brother's when he was in PR. But anyway, we'll try to get David on the show if he'll come on and debate me on whether or not inflation is a concern. But anyway, let me go quickly back to the phones. We got a lot of people that want to talk to Bernard. Next up is David in Kansas City.
Hi, Peter.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, Peter. Hi. Yeah, you mentioned your son likes play money. I just got some from the bank. I'm going to take it to a coin shop tomorrow and get some real money. It's pretty obvious that Bernard is a victim of the same thing your father was a victim of. It's a political prosecution. Any bullion dealer, or most bullion dealers, sell what they call rounds that are designed to look like Walking Liberty, the Barber $50, etc. The only difference is they advertise them as rounds. Now, once those coins go out into circulation, it makes no difference what they called them at the point of sale if they look like government-minted currency. They're more likely to be mistaken for an actual coin than what Bernard is selling.
I see all the time on TV they advertise these tribute coins that are made to look like legitimate U.S. coins, but they're not actually made. They're not actually made of gold or silver. They say we have 6 milligrams of gold, and they sell it for like $10, and it's got like 5 cents worth of gold plating on it. But it actually looks like the coin it's tributing. I mean, that's much more of counterfeiting because you're putting a fraction of the real amount of gold or silver in it, and you're fashioning it to look exactly like the legitimate coin. And they're advertising those on TV.
MSNBC was running ads like that for the gold, what looked like a gold buffalo to me.
Yeah, they're
and
called
they made
these.
It sound like they were selling gold buffalo.
I know they're called tribute coins. It's a scam because they say gold prices are rising, buy them quick. But there's such a small amount of gold in there, gold prices could triple, and it wouldn't really impact the value of the coin. It's a con for people who don't know any better. But the point is that they actually look like that if anything is counterfeit, it's those tribute things, not what Bernard was making.
Yeah, if I was the average citizen looking at that, the only thing that tipped me off was they were selling it for installments of $50, 3 installments of $50. So it looked like a gold buffalo to me, but I'm thinking, how could? And then I watched the ad again and realized that they called it a clad coin and a replica.
Yeah, and they say they're clad in like one in a milligram, in like 14 milligrams. A milligram is a thousandth of a gram. I mean, it's like it's got a little dust sprinkled on it. There's no gold in that coin. The whole thing is a con, and I think I think a lot of people are suckered into buying those things. But what Bernard is doing is legitimate. Anyway, thanks for the call. Next up is Melanie calling from Essex, Connecticut. You're on with Peter and Bernard.
Hi, Mr. Schiff. I voted for you and I donated to you when you were running for Senator Dodsey. And I'm so sorry. We need you here. That you didn't get in.
We need a few of me. But anyway, go ahead.
You need a lot of you, many of you. Anyway, Bernard, hi, it's Melanie.
Hi, Melanie.
I'm working on a couple more radio shows for you. I'm hoping that I'll hear. Anyway, thank you, Peter, if I may call you Peter, for having him on. And if you would like a silver certificate, I would be happy to send you one of mine. Peter?
What are they?
Well, they were the Liberty Dollar certificate when you were just talking about.
Oh, sure. I've never seen one.
Oh yeah, Melanie, please send one to Peter because I don't have one. All of mine have been confiscated. But send one to Peter with my thanks for the interview. That'd be wonderful, Melanie. Thank you.
I would be happy to send one to you if I could have your address, or will Tom, who was so gracious to get back to me right away, Mr. Elliott. Should I just call him?
Yeah, call him.
And I'll send one to you through Mr. Elliott?
Sure.
Okay, hang in there, Bernard.
All right.
We'll do everything we possibly can to help you.
Thanks, Melanie. Next caller is from Ohio. Larry, you're on with Peter and Bernard.
How are you doing today, Peter?
Doing okay. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for being a truthful voice out there when all we seem to hear these days is propaganda. And Bernard, I feel for you. I called to make a comment to you, my friend. I've been through kind of what you're going through with the federal government, not the same charges. I know your frustration, and I know how you feel. It's horrible what they're doing to you. I was a buyer of your dollars on eBay many years ago when this all started. I own 2 of your gold dollars.
When you bought those, bought those coins, were you under the impression that was legitimate U.S. currency?
I knew full well that they were not legitimate U.S. currency. I knew what they were. They were advertised as a barter system or whatever you want to do with these. They're, in no way, shape, or form did I feel that I was buying U.S. currency. I wanted the people to hear that a consumer of your product knew for sure that they were not in any way advertised.
Basically, nobody is defrauded. You have somebody that's producing a product that another American wants to buy. It doesn't harm anybody. Gold is legal. Silver is legal. Yet he's in jail for supplying a product that people wanted to buy, and he didn't misrepresent what it was. He told you exactly what it was. Yeah.
In no way did he misrepresent it, and he's in jail for going against the U.S. government.
Yeah, and you have the U.S. government has the gall to criticize other nations for human rights or for taking political prisoners. We do the exact same thing here. Our government is, there's a question of degree. Maybe they're not putting him to death. There might be some countries where they wouldn't have tried him; they just would have killed him. So at least we're not that bad. But it's the same idea. We're putting someone in jail not because he did something wrong, but because the government doesn't like what he's doing, and the government perceives some kind of threat to their power.
And
that's what they're doing, Peter.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's what
they tried to get you to settle out of court and made you all kind of offers. That's how they do things. I know what you went through, and I just wanted to let you know I feel for you. And there's a lot of us out here. We know that you were doing the right thing. You were trying to help us, and we feel for you, my friend. And we'll all be praying for you and hope you get through this.
Oh, we will. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. And maybe time for one more caller is Peter calling from Long Island. You're on with Peter and Bernard.
Yes, hi, Peter. Great show, and I'm a big fan of yours.
Thank you.
I really don't know Bernard. So my main question, I had a couple of questions towards you, and I'd like to just say I have an account where you have an IRA, which was the best move I made when the crash came, because I made 100% of my money in 2 years.
Don't talk about the actual percentages. They're gonna have the regulators don't like that. But thank you.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm not promoting anything. But here's the question I have. I'm really getting nervous again because I don't see the Republicans serious enough to cut spending, and I have a feeling, like you say, we're in deep trouble. And here's my question. I was thinking about taking a hit again with my 401k because the money I put into your fund, I only had a certain amount to take out of my 401k. So I'm thinking about taking a hit and paying the government to get it out because I don't have many options. I have all I have is a money market fund.
Are you able? Well, are you able to roll it over to an IRA or something that we can manage for you?
I already did whatever I could into your account, but now if I'm not allowed to, I would have to pay a penalty. That was like profit sharing money that I was allowed to take out.
Yeah, it depends on the penalty, but you're right. And just like what I played, I spoke yesterday about the warning from Bill Gross. The government is going to impoverish American savers by inflating away its debts. That is what I am convinced is going to happen. And, yes, you've got to do whatever you can, in my opinion, to protect yourself. And I think people who are holding on to Bernard's coins are protecting themselves, but the government doesn't want us. The government wants us helpless so it can victimize us and impoverish us. But
can I ask you one other question?
Well, not today because we're about to run out of time, but feel free to call back again on Monday. I will be back for another live episode of The Peter Schiff Show. And thanks again, Bernard, for sticking around. I wish you the best. Hopefully you can avoid spending time in jail because you certainly don't belong there. Anyway, have a great weekend, everybody. And I will be back again on Monday with another episode of The Peter Schiff Show on SchiffRadio.com, the gold standard in talk radio.